Where's that reset button?
Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Today we'll be tackling a question, when is a game overrated? You've seen it before. A game comes out of nowhere and people start freaking out over it, calling it the greatest game of all time. And then suddenly the people who don't quite get it start claiming it's overrated. But is it? What's the difference between a game that's overrated and one that's just that good? No game is ever going to be liked by everyone, but is it fair for people to claim it's overrated just because they don't like it? Take Five Nights at Freddy's. When this small indie game came out, people thought it's a pretty neat concept. A horror game that left you completely defenseless, only having the ability to prolong your inevitable next death as you try to survive 5 nights at a haunted pizzeria. Sure, it was built around cheap jump scares, but it never pretended to be anything else. It was something you enjoyed for a night and then moved on. But then something odd happened. It got popular, and I mean mega popular. Suddenly there were a dozen sequels, books, toys, and even a movie in the works. And now that small indie game you thought was kinda neat was suddenly in your face 24/7. And that small appreciation you had for it turned to hate, and Scott Cawthon was an overrated hack. But why? The game didn't change. It was still a small indie game made by one person for the sole purpose of easy jump scares. But now that game was being looked at through a magnifying glass, it was suddenly lazy and cheap. But was it overrated just because more people liked it? People weren't calling it a Citizen Kane of video games. Hell, they weren't even calling it the Good Burger of video games. In fact, the first game is sitting at a fairly close 7.8 from reviewers and 7.1 from users on Metacritic. People were simply invested in the lore and enjoyed watching other people getting scared while playing. And in this instance, I argue that no, the game is not overrated simply for being popular alone.
So, when is a game overrated? Well, the safe answer would be to say that it's up to an individual person to decide whether or not a game is overrated for them and them alone. Just because a game is overrated for one person doesn't mean it's overrated for anybody else. And to a point, that's true, of course. But this is Devil's Advocate. I'm not going to give you a safe answer. I say yes, a game can be overrated, but not just for being too popular. A game can only be overrated when it's exactly that, rated higher than it normally should be. Usually because of someone's subjective taste getting in the way of their objective opinions. So, how do you know if someone's rating a game higher than they normally would? Well, for this we're going to look at one example in particular, Skyward Sword. Now, I know what you're thinking, Skyward Sword, doesn't everyone hate in that game enough? Some people call it the worst 3D Zelda game of all time. How could it possibly be overrated? Well, that's exactly when a game has this chance to be overrated. Let me explain.
When this game first came out, reviewers were going nuts for it. It was getting 10s at every website and magazine, and it was the greatest Zelda ever made. Well, at least it was, until everyone else got to play it. Players everywhere were confused as to how this game got so many perfect scores. It was good, but perfect? The greatest Zelda ever made? Something didn't add up. Why was this linear game that reused the same 3 areas and 2 of the bosses 3 times each being called greater than the Ocarina of Time or Link to the Past? Was this game truly overrated, or was it just a difference in opinion? Well, let's take a look at how the biggest gaming website reviewed it. IGN gave Skyward Sword a 10 out of 10, calling it the greatest Zelda of all time. Okay, so maybe they just happened to really like it. That could be, however, just a couple months later an article appeared claiming the game was repetitive and bloated. Alright, some fairly harsh words, but no game is perfect, and it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't worthy of all its praise. Flash forward later to IGN's top 125 Nintendo games of all time. So where does the greatest Zelda game of all time take place? Way down at number 102. Sandwiched right in between Mario Paint and Excitebike. I guess the game just couldn't quite match up to Picross DS. Or Street Pass game? Does that even count? The point of this isn't to bash on IGN or even Skyward Sword. For all its flaws, I enjoyed the game. Although Fee made me want to throw the Master Sword at Elden Volcano Lord of the Rings style. I'm simply trying to explain that sometimes when a game first comes out, you get really into it. And you're enjoying it so much that maybe those flaws don't stick out as much. Which is fine, unless it's your job to review games. The problem comes with the initial hype of a new game. Heck, look at Final Fantasy 13. That game got great reviews and now everyone hates it. And the same goes for any type of media, whether it's a TV show, movie, or video game. So, can a game be overrated? I say yes. But before you go near its Undertale form and tell them they're all wrong, it's not about just being popular alone. I believe a game can only be overrated when it's that, rated higher than it probably should be. If a game is getting plenty of love and attention years later, then that's not overrated. maybe you just don't care for it. But if someone tells you that Ocarina of Time or Final Fantasy VII is overrated, just explain to them there's a reason why they get so much attention. They're loved by millions to this day. But on the other hand, if a game comes out and you don't quite get all the praise for it, maybe just wait until the hype dies down and see what people are saying then. This is Devil's Advocate, and if you don't always understand the hype, then this video's for you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you liked this episode, make sure to like and subscribe. Man, wasn't this the greatest episode I've ever seen of anything? Truly perfect.